They used to call me Mr. Walker. That's how I signed my name on the blackboard every morning for 40 years, chalk under my nails, tie just a little too tight, the scent of old books clinging to my sleeves. Now they call me George. When they remember to. Time for your meds, George, says the nurse. She's new, early 20s, scrolling on her phone while talking. Doesn't look me in the eye. None of them do anymore. I live in a place with lavender curtains and fake flowers in the hallway. A place where forgotten people go to die, quietly, with dignity stripped down to adult diapers and riddance of The Price is Right. My daughter, Claire, brought me here 6 months ago. Said it would be temporary. Said she'd visit. Every Sunday. She came twice. She used to sit on my shoulders when I mowed the lawn. Her laughter would fly into the trees. Now she can't make eye contact longer than a handshake. Dad, it's just too much, she'd said. I have the kids, and work, and you have me, I had whispered. But she didn't hear that part. Or maybe she did. And didn't care. It's strange. You give your life to something, students, family, purpose, and one day, you're just an old man with tea-stained teeth and shaky hands. Nobody asks me about the books I loved. About Frost or Faulkner. No one wants to hear what I know. They want me to nap. They want me to stay quiet. There's a chair I sit in by the window. That's my world now. A parking lot, a trash bin, and the squirrels that fight over peanut shells. I watch them for hours. They're scrappy, desperate. Reminds me of some of my students. Funny, some of them used to say I changed their lives. But no one's changed mine back. Not since that final day at Lincoln High. They gave me a plaque, a sheet cake, and a handshake from a principal who didn't even know my wife had passed the week before. To Mr. Walker, a lifetime of lessons. A lifetime. That's all it got me, a slice of dry cake and a spot by the window in room 217. But something shifted this morning. It started with a letter. No return address. Just my name, written in tight, slanted handwriting I hadn't seen in over 30 years. Inside, a single line. I never forgot what you did for me. Meet me by the old school, Sunday, 3 p.m. L. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and placed it under my pillow like a secret. I hadn't been outside these walls in months. But suddenly, something inside me stirred, not hope. No. It wasn't soft like hope. It was sharper. Like purpose. Like something was waking up in me that had slept too long. Sunday came like a slow exhale. I told the nurse I was going for a walk. She gave me a paper cup of pills and a disinterested nod. I didn't take them. I didn't need to be numb today. I dressed in silence, slacks that barely fit, a button-up that still smelled faintly of cedar and old chalk. My shoes, polished with tissues, were stiff from neglect. They hadn't seen the outside in months. Neither had I. The world hit me like a wave, wind colder than I remembered, sun warmer than I deserved. The air didn't smell like sanitizer and soup. It smelled like November leaves and car exhaust. Like life. And memory. Lincoln High was 5 blocks down from the home. I used to walk that path every morning, coffee in hand, briefcase swinging, nodding to neighbors who knew my name. Now the street was different. Gentrified. Empty. Pre's older, or maybe just me. When I reached the school, it looked smaller. The brick facade had faded. The windows were mirrored now, like they didn't want to see the past anymore. Like even the building was ashamed of what it used to be. But I remembered every crack in the pavement, every fire drill, every storm that made the hallway leak near room 103. I waited by the statue of the eagle, still chipped at the beak, still noble. 305, no one. 311, then footsteps. A man in his 40s approached, hesitant. Leather jacket, jeans, sunglasses too dark for the grey sky. He stopped 3 feet away. "You really came," he said. His voice, it struck something deep. Liam. He was one of mine. Troublemaker. Sat in the back, cracked jokes, failed everything. But his essays bled truth. He once wrote a poem about his mother leaving that made me cry in the teacher's lounge. "I remember you," I said, voice rough. He looked older than he should, but strong. Carried himself like someone who would build his life out of scrap. "I owed you a moment," he said. I blinked. "You owed me nothing." "No," he replied, "I owed you everything." Then he handed me something, a thin, worn paperback. Collected works of Raymond Carver. I opened the cover. Inside, an inscription. "To the only man who saw me. I teach now, too." Your voice still echoes in mine. L.W. I stood there, heart thudding like an old furnace trying to reignite. "You remembered," I whispered. He nodded. "I wouldn't be who I am without you. I figured maybe you needed to know that." I looked down at the book, then back at him. And for the first time in a very long while, I stood tall. Not straight, my back wouldn't allow that, but tall in the way that mattered. Liam smiled, shook my hand, and walked away. No drama. No hug. Just the truth handed back to me when I needed it most. I sat on the school steps for a while, watching the grey clouds roll across the sky. My hands trembled not from age, but from something else. A crack. Not in my body, but in the silence around it. One student. One voice. And suddenly, the past wasn't a wound. It was a mirror. They forgot me. But I was still in them. I didn't go back to the home right away. I walked. Past the diner where I used to grade essays over coffee and burnt toast. Past the empty bookstore that once held poetry readings for my students. Past the bench where Margaret, my late wife, would wait for me on Fridays with a paper bag full of croissants. The town had shrunk, or maybe I'd just stopped seeing it. Funny how grief folds time. You stop counting days. Stop noticing seasons. One day it's summer, then suddenly you are old, and no one calls you Mr. anymore. Just George. Just another man with grey in his beard and pills in his pocket. But now, I held something else. That book Liam gave me, Carver's collected works, felt heavier than it looked. It was proof. Proof that I hadn't just existed, but mattered. That somewhere, my words still walked around inside other people. Maybe even shaped them. I remembered something I used to tell my students when they didn't want to read. Books are like time machines with heartbeats. Now, I understood that more than ever. When I got back to the facility, the nurse looked startled. We were about to call the police. I ignored her. walked straight to my room, sat at the desk, that ugly fake oak slab they call furniture, and pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched in months. It still smelled of ink and old coffee. I opened it and began to write. Not for anyone else. Just for me. Later that evening, during dinner, mashed potatoes that tasted like paste, I sat at my usual table with the same three half-silent residents. They chewed slowly, looked down, like life had wrung out their voices. Then, for no reason I can explain, I said, "Did any of you have a job that meant something?" They blinked at me. One woman, Carol, I think, squinted like she hadn't heard that kind of question in decades. "I was a nurse," she said finally. "Delivered over 100 babies. Knew each one's name." A man named Don chuckled. "I was a mailman. 40 years. People trusted me with their secrets." I smiled. "I was a teacher. Literature. Tried to show kids that books could save them." For a moment, the table fell silent, but not the bad kind. A heavy silence. A holy one. Then Carol nodded. "They don't know what they lost, do they?" "No," I said. "But maybe we do." And there it was. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just dignity, slipping back into the room like an old friend. They hadn't taken it from me. Not really. They'd just made me forget it was still mine. After dinner, I went back to my room and began writing letters. To old students. To Claire. Even to a few teachers who had retired before me and vanished into the void. Most would never reply. But that wasn't the point. The point was, I had more to say. Days passed, but they didn't feel the same anymore. Routine didn't choke me like it used to. I still woke early, body creaking, mind foggy, but there was something sharp beneath the surface now. Like I was no longer drifting. Like I remembered I had weight. I began keeping a list. A list of names. Not for bitterness. For memory. The kids who swore they hated books but ended up staying after class to ask what existential meant. The girl who wrote about her alcoholic father and cried when I didn't give her an A because she knew she could do better, and so did I. The boy who came out as gay and gave me a letter instead of saying the words, and the hug I gave him afterward when the world still felt cruel. They were all there. And I was still here. The letters I'd mailed. A few came back. Address no longer valid. Recipient moved. One had been torn, water-stained, returned like it had never wanted to leave in the first place. But then, one afternoon, a letter came back. Thin envelope. Neat cursive. Inside, 2 short lines. Mr. Walker, I teach now, too. I never forgot your story about the boy and the fire. I tell it every year. Thank you for giving me courage before I had any of my own. No name. No return address. Just those words. I sat still for a long time. Let the silence speak for itself. At dinner that evening, something unexpected happened. Nurse Katie, the youngest one, always glued to her phone, came to my table holding one of the books from the library cart. Someone said you used to be a teacher? She asked, half smirking like it might be a joke. I replied. For 40 years. She hesitated, then slid the book toward me. The Great Gatsby. Dog-eared. Annotated with someone else's highlighter. I have a class starting next month, she said. Night college. Thought I'd give this a shot. You any good with this stuff? I didn't speak right away. I just opened the book, flipped to the first page, and began to read softly. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Her face changed. The sarcasm faded. Something like respect, or maybe just curiosity, took its place. You still got it, she said quietly. No, I answered. I never lost it. You all just stopped asking. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about power. Not the loud kind. Not the kind with fists or money or politics. The quiet kind. The kind that takes root in people and waits. The kind that doesn't need credit or applause. The kind that survives neglect, mockery, time. I didn't scream. I waited. And now, they were starting to remember. Not because I begged them, but because I stood still long enough for the noise to die down and for the echoes to find their way back. They thought I was done. You could see it in their eyes when they passed me in the hallway, the staff, the occasional visitor, even the other residents. That look people get when they see a bent spine, a slow step, trembling hands. Like you are already halfway gone. But I was awake now. More awake than I had been in years. Something had settled into my bones, not anger, no. That's easy. Cheap. This was different. Solid. Focused. Inevitable. It began in the lounge. I started bringing books down from the library cart every morning, placing them carefully on the coffee table, swapping out the gossip magazines and Sudoku puzzles. I'd leave them open to a single passage. Just one. Faulkner. Angelou. Whitman. Baldwin. Carson McCullers. Words that sliced, not souped. The other residents noticed. At first, they grumbled. Who keeps bringing these dusty things here? But a few days later, I caught Don, the old mailman, squinting over a paragraph from Of Mice and Men. Is this about mercy? He asked me. It's about choice, I replied. Then Carol, the nurse, surprised me. She brought me a binder. Inside were printed worksheets. She'd downloaded materials from some online community college program. Could you help me? She said, eyes lowered. I never really learned how to write essays. That night we sat under the flickering yellow light near the vending machine, talking about thesis statements and clarity. I showed her how to break apart a sentence, how to trim the fat, how to make a single line cut. By the end of the week, 2 more people had joined us. By the end of the month, we had a class. They never saw it coming. Not the staff. Not the administrators. Not even Claire, my daughter, when she finally visited and saw me sitting at the head of a makeshift table, glasses perched low, leading a discussion on To Kill a Mockingbird. You're teaching? She asked, stunned. I looked up at her, steady, calm. I never stopped. She flushed, clearly uncomfortable. I just thought after everything you were tired. I was, I said. But not of this. She sat down, awkward. Watching me. Watching them. These people she'd assumed were too old, too broken, too far gone. Now asking questions, quoting paragraphs, learning. She didn't say much after that. Didn't have to. Because she knew. She'd left me here to disappear. But I'd made myself visible again, not by pleading, not by shouting, but by becoming undeniable. Later that night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Same wrinkles. Same thinning hair. But the eyes. Sharp. Alive. Burning quiet. There's a kind of revenge you don't need to plan. You just have to endure long enough for the world to remember what you are. And when they do, it's not a scream. It's a whisper that stings worse. You were wrong about me. One more chapter remains. They call it a facility, but I turned it into something else. Every Wednesday at 2 p.m., we gathered 6 of us now. Former nurses, accountants, a retired plumber named Hank who quoted Frost like scripture. Katie, the young nurse, sat in the back. She never spoke. Just listened, eyes wide, phone in her pocket for once. I gave them prompts. Asked them to write not for grades, not for applause. Just to remember themselves. We wrote about first loves, regrets, childhood homes. One man cried reading his. Another didn't read aloud, just folded the paper and kissed it like a letter to the dead. And every week, we left the table different than we arrived. Claire visited more often now. She brought my grandkids once. They were quiet at first. Then they saw the walls covered with drawings, quotes, old student photos mailed back to me with scribbled notes like, "You told me I had a voice. You were right. Your class made me brave. I teach now, too." My grandson looked up at me and asked, "Were you famous?" I smiled. Not really. But in that moment, I think he saw me, not just as Grandpa George, the old man who ate pudding slowly and shuffled his feet, but as something else. Something bigger. Claire stayed behind after the kids left. She sat on the edge of my bed. That silence again. "I didn't know," she said. I didn't answer. Because she wasn't wrong. She didn't know. She hadn't asked. But she looked me in the eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw not guilt but respect. That was enough. One evening, Katie asked me something. "Why are you doing all this, George?" I paused. Then told her the truth. Because they tried to bury me in silence. But I remembered how to speak. And I wasn't just speaking. I was teaching. Still. Even now. When I died, it wasn't dramatic. No gasping, no sudden drop. Just a slow, quiet settling. Like dusk. They found me in the chair by the window, a book on my chest. Leaves of grass. Open to this line. "I exist as I am, that is enough." The nurses cried. Carol led a small service. Katie brought her college textbook and placed it on my nightstand with a sticky note. "You reminded me I am not invisible." "Thank you." Claire gave a eulogy. Not of apology, but of remembrance. She spoke of the table I'd rebuilt from inside a dying building. Of the voices I had pulled out of silence. Of a man who didn't scream. Didn't beg. Just waited and taught until the world saw him again. This was never about revenge. Not really. It was about the quiet reclamation of self. About showing them, all of them, that you cannot measure a man by the dust on his shoes or the tremble in his hand. Because purpose doesn't wither. It waits. And when it returns, it doesn't knock. It opens the door and says, "Sit down. Class isn't over yet."
Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.